Almost didn't notice her hands shaking. That's the thing that gets me, even now. My daughter was standing right there in the hospital hallway, telling me everything was fine, and her hands were shaking like she was holding something she was afraid to drop. I told myself it was just nerves. She'd always been anxious around hospitals, ever since her mother passed in one 12 years ago. I told myself a lot of things that week. My name doesn't matter much to this story, but people who know me call me Uncle Edmund. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a high school history teacher in Columbus, Ohio, and when I retired, I did what every man my age dreams about. I sat on my porch, drank coffee that was actually hot for once, and read books that had nothing to do with the Civil War curriculum. My wife Helen passed in 2013, breast cancer. After that, it was just me, my daughter Sylvia, and whatever family chose to show up for Sunday dinners. Sylvia was my whole world. 34 years old, sharp as a tack, got her mother's eyes and her mother's laugh. She married a man named Conrad about 6 years ago. He sold commercial real estate, wore suits that cost more than my first car, and always had a way of looking at you like he was calculating something. I never said that out loud. You don't say things like that about your daughter's husband. You just smile and pass the potato salad. They had 2 kids. Little girls, 7 and 5. Whenever I'd babysit, the older one, Penny, would fall asleep on my shoulder, watching cartoons, and I'd just sit there not moving, afraid to wake her, thinking this is it. This is the whole point of everything. I'm telling you all this so you understand what I had, so you understand what was almost taken from me. It started in February, about 8 months ago. I'd been having some fatigue, nothing dramatic, just the kind of tired that makes you feel like you're moving through water. My doctor, a good man I've seen for 15 years, suggested we run some blood work and do a full physical. Routine stuff. Sylvia offered to drive me to the appointment, and I said yes, because what father says no when his daughter wants to spend time with him? The appointment was at a clinic about 20 minutes from my house. Sylvia picked me up at 9 in the morning. She'd brought me a coffee from the place I like on Henderson Road, the one that does the dark roast. I remember thinking how thoughtful that was. I remember holding that cup and feeling grateful. That's the detail that comes back to me at night sometimes. The appointment went fine. Blood pressure slightly elevated. Doctor wanted to adjust one of my medications. I'd been on a mild blood thinner for about 2 years after a minor cardiac event. Nothing serious, but enough that I needed monitoring. He wrote me a new prescription and told me to pick it up within a few days. Sylvia sat in the waiting room the whole time. When I came out, she jumped up and asked me every single question. What did he say? What did he find? Is everything okay? I thought that was love. I thought that was just my girl worrying about her dad. On the way home, she asked if she could pick up my prescription for me. She said she was going right past the pharmacy anyway. She had errands to run. I handed her the paper without a second thought. She dropped me off, gave me a long hug, told me she loved me. 3 weeks later, I was back in my doctor's office because I felt wrong. That's the only word for it. Not sick exactly, not in any way I could point to. Just wrong. Like my body was a radio slightly off the station. I was bruising easily. I'd wake up with headaches that took hours to clear. I was tired in a way that sleep didn't fix. My doctor looked at my chart, looked at me and said he wanted to rerun some labs. He also asked me to bring in my current medications. I brought everything in the next morning. He went through each bottle, checked the dosages, and then he got quiet in a way that doctors get quiet when they don't want to alarm you before they're sure. He excused himself for a few minutes. When he came back, he had a woman with him. One of the pharmacists who worked out of the same medical building. Her name was Yvonne. She was maybe 50, calm and professional, and she set my pill bottle on the desk between us and said, "Mr. Ha, Edmund, I need to ask you something and I need you to answer me honestly." I said, "Of course." She said, "Did you fill this prescription yourself or did someone fill it for you?" I told her my daughter had picked it up. She and my doctor exchanged a look. Just a half-second thing, barely a flicker, but I saw it. The prescription he had written was for 2.5 milligrams. The pills in my bottle were 10 milligrams. Same medication, same appearance, but 4 times the intended dose. For a man my age, with my cardiac history, taking that dosage for 3 weeks without monitoring could cause serious internal bleeding. Over time, it would. I sat in that chair and I didn't say anything for a long moment. Yvonne said she needed to know if this could have been a pharmacy error. She'd already pulled the records from 2 pharmacies near my home, and neither of them had a record of filling a prescription for me in February, which meant whoever had filled it hadn't used my insurance, which meant they'd paid cash, which meant they hadn't wanted a record. I heard all of this and something in my chest went cold and still. I drove home. I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Sylvia had learned to make biscuits from her mother, where she'd done homework at the table in the corner, where she'd called me crying the night Conrad proposed because she was so happy she didn't know what to do with herself. I sat in that kitchen and I tried to find an explanation that wasn't the one sitting right in front of me. I couldn't find one. I called my brother-in-law Theodore, Helen's younger brother, a man I've trusted since before I married his sister. He's a retired police detective out of Cincinnati, 70 now, moves slower than he used to, but his mind is exactly as sharp as it ever was. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which is a skill most people don't have. When I finished, he said, "Edmund, do not change anything. Don't confront her. Don't change your routine. Don't let her know you know. I'm coming down Thursday." Theodore came Thursday. He brought his former partner, a woman named Iris, who now worked as a private investigator. The 3 of us sat at my kitchen table and laid out everything carefully, like we were building something that needed to hold weight. Iris explained that what I was describing, if it was intentional, would be classified as criminal poisoning under Ohio law. She said the cash purchase was significant. She said she wanted to look into Conrad more than Sylvia at first because the pattern, the financial motive, the methodical approach, fit a certain profile. "What financial motive?" I asked. Theodore looked at me with a kind of sorrow I recognized from when he'd told me Helen was gone. "I had a life insurance policy, a good one, taken out in the 80s when Sylvia was born, updated twice since. In the event of my death, the primary beneficiary was Sylvia. The secondary beneficiary, added at her request when they married, was Conrad. The payout was $400,000. I also owned my house outright, 3-bedroom ranch in a neighborhood where houses now sold for close to $300,000, and I had retirement savings that my financial advisor at Edward Jones had helped me build over 30 years. I knew all of this, of course. I just had never seen it the way Theodore was showing it to me now, laid out flat. A reason. The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I went about my days normally, or tried to. I stopped taking the medication. My real doctor was monitoring me with the correct dosage, but I kept the tampered bottle in my medicine cabinet in case it was needed as evidence. Iris had photographed everything. She was making calls, pulling threads, and every few days she'd update Theodore, who'd update me. What she found was worse than I expected, and somehow exactly what I feared. Conrad had taken a second mortgage on their house the previous year, without telling Sylvia. He owed money to people who were not banks. His commercial real estate business had been struggling for 2 years, propped up by debt and deals that kept falling through. He was, by Iris's estimate, somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000 underwater. He had been searching quietly and systematically for a way out. Sylvia, it appeared, didn't know all of this. Iris believed Conrad had told her pieces of it, enough to scare her, enough to make her feel desperate, but had withheld the full scope. What he had told her, we later learned, was that if her father passed naturally, they could use the insurance and the estate to get clear. He had framed it as a plan. He had used words like timing and peace of mind and "your father's not well anyway." When I heard that last part, "your father's not well anyway," I had to get up and stand at my kitchen window for a while. I have a red maple in the backyard. Helen planted it the year Sylvia started kindergarten. It was 30 years old now, wide and thick, and in February it was bare. I stood there looking at it and thought about all the Februaries I'd watched from that window. I thought about the man sitting inside my daughter's house, looking at my life and seeing a number. Theodore and Iris brought everything to the Columbus Police Department on a Monday morning. They had a contact, a detective named Whitfield, who'd worked financial crimes for 15 years. Whitfield reviewed what they had and agreed it was substantial. Within 48 hours, there was an investigation open. I was asked not to say anything to Sylvia. That was the hardest instruction I've ever followed. She called me twice that week, the normal calls, checking in, asking if I needed groceries, telling me Penny had lost a tooth. I talked to her like everything was fine. I asked about the tooth. I asked what the tooth fairy had left. I said I loved her and I'd see her Sunday. I hung up the phone and sat in the dark for an hour. Sunday came and I made dinner. Pot roast the way Helen used to do it, with the carrots and the onions browned first. Sylvia and Conrad came with the girls. Conrad sat across from me and ate my food and talked about the Bengals, and asked if I'd thought about updating my will now that I was getting older. He said it casually, the way you say pass the salt. I looked at him. I said I'd been meaning to talk to my attorney, actually. He smiled. He had a very easy smile, Conrad did. 2 days later, on a Tuesday afternoon, they came for him, not at my house, at his office downtown. Whitfield and 2 other detectives, warrants for his financial records and his phone, and one more piece that Iris had found. A search history on a device registered to their home network. Searches for medication interactions. Searches for how long it takes for anticoagulant overdose to cause symptoms. Searches made in January, 6 weeks before my prescription was filled. Conrad was taken in for questioning Tuesday afternoon. By Wednesday morning, he'd been charged. Sylvia called me at 7 in the morning. She was crying so hard she could barely speak. I let her talk. I sat at my kitchen table and I listened to my daughter cry and say she didn't know all of it. She swore she didn't know about the searches. She thought it was just going to be, and then she stopped herself and said, "Daddy, I'm so sorry." There it was. She had known something. Not everything, maybe not the specifics, maybe she'd looked the other way at things she should have examined, but she had known something was being planned, and she had not called me, and she had not stopped it. I didn't yell. I'm not a man who yells. I said, "I know, baby," and I meant it as both things. I know you're sorry, and I know you knew. The silence between us on that phone was the longest silence of my 67 years. Theodore came over that evening. We sat on the back porch with 2 glasses of bourbon, watching the light leave the sky, and he told me about a time when Helen, as a teenager, had done something that broke their mother's heart. Nothing like this, just ordinary family heartbreak. He said their mother had cried for a week and then gotten up and made breakfast. "That's all you can do," he said. "You cry, and then you get up and make breakfast." I thought about my granddaughters, 7 and 5 years old, asleep in a house where their father had just been arrested. Little Penny, who fell asleep on my shoulder. Her little sister, who called me Pop Pop and ran at me full speed every time I walked through the door. They didn't choose any of this. In the weeks that followed, things moved the way legal things move. Slowly, with a lot of paperwork and waiting. Conrad's attorney tried several approaches. The charge was ultimately reduced through negotiation, but he pleaded guilty to criminal tampering and fraud. He was sentenced to 4 years with eligibility for parole after 2. He lost his real estate license. The house went into foreclosure. Sylvia was not charged. The district attorney's office determined there was insufficient evidence that she had known the specific method, even if she'd known the general intent. I don't know if I believe that distinction entirely. I don't know if it matters. What I know is that she is my daughter, and her daughters are my grandchildren, and I am still here. I updated my estate documents with my attorney's help. I set up a trust for Penny and her sister that is managed by Theodore and cannot be touched by either of their parents. I keep my own medical appointments now, always, without exception. I pick up my own prescriptions. Sylvia and I talk, not like before. I won't pretend that what was broken has been repaired like nothing happened. But we talk. She is in therapy. She says she is trying to understand how she let herself be led somewhere she never should have gone. I believe her. I think belief is a choice you make, sometimes, more than a feeling you have. Some mornings I sit on my back porch with my coffee and I look at Helen's maple tree and I think about all the things I still have. A brother-in-law who drove 4 hours without being asked, A doctor who got quiet in exactly the right way at exactly the right moment. A pharmacist named Yvonne who asked a question she didn't have to ask. Two little girls who still call me Pop Pop. I almost wasn't here for any of it. I almost became a number in a column, a problem that got solved. But I'm still here. And some mornings when the light comes through the maple at just the right angle, I think Helen's red tree looks like it's on fire. In the good way, the alive way. And I think that's enough. I think that's more than enough. If you're listening to this, and you have someone in your life you've been trusting automatically, without looking, I'm not saying don't trust, I'm saying pay attention. Love doesn't ask you to stop seeing clearly. Real love, the kind that actually holds you, it doesn't need the lights off. I learned that the hard way. I learned it in a doctor's office on a Tuesday morning with a pill bottle sitting between me and the truth. But I learned it, and I'm still here to tell you. I keep coming back to that coffee cup, the dark roast from the place on Henderson Road, the one Sylvia knew I liked. She brought it that morning without me asking. I held it with both hands on the way to the clinic and thought, this is what a good daughter looks like. And she was. Once. Or maybe she was trying to be, and something got in the way of that. I'm still not sure those are different things. What I know is this. Every consequence in this story grew directly out of a choice someone made. Conrad chose to look at my life and see an exit strategy. Sylvia chose to hear pieces of that plan and not pick up the phone. And I, for years without realizing it, chose comfort over clarity. I chose not to look too hard at the man across my dinner table because looking hard at him meant looking hard at what my daughter had chosen. That's on me. That's the part I've had to sit with. There's a version of integrity that isn't about grand gestures. It's smaller than that. It's Yvonne, the pharmacist, asking a question she technically didn't have to ask. It's Theodore driving 4 hours on a Thursday because I called and my voice sounded wrong. It's my doctor getting quiet in exactly the right way and not rushing past something that didn't add up. These people did the right thing not because it was easy, but because they had built the habit of doing it. Character isn't a decision you make in a crisis. It's 1,000 small decisions you made before the crisis arrived. And then there's the matter of seeing clearly. I spent years being intelligent about history. I could walk a classroom through the causes of the Civil War without notes, but I was willfully blind about the man eating pot roast in my kitchen. Real wisdom, I think, is the ability to apply your sharpest thinking to the things closest to you, not just the safe subjects. It means asking the uncomfortable question. It means following the thread, even when you don't want to see where it leads. Yvonne saw something in a pill bottle, and she followed it. That pharmacist saved my life, not with heroics, but with the simple discipline of paying attention. The part that took the most out of me, more than the fear, more than the anger, was continuing. Getting up the morning after Sylvia called me crying. Making breakfast, calling Theodore back, sitting across from my granddaughters at a table that had gotten quieter and choosing, consciously, to still be present for them. That's not resilience in the motivational poster sense. It's just the stubborn insistence that what you still have is worth showing up for. Penny lost a tooth that week. Her little sister called me Pop Pop and ran at me full speed. I was there to catch her. I think about Helen's red maple sometimes, and I think that tree has been through 30 winters. It didn't survive by being untouched. It survived by being rooted. That's all I've got. Be rooted. Pay attention. And when someone shows you who they are, have the courage to believe them, even when believing them costs you something. Especially then.